At 9:47 a.m. on April 12, 1945, above Koriyama, Japan, Staff Sergeant Henry, Erwin leaned over a chute in the nose section of the B-29 Superfortress city of Los Angeles. A white phosphorus marker bomb detonated just inches from his face. The 23-year-old radio operator, hailing from Adamsville, Alabama, had successfully completed 10 combat sorties with the 52nd Bombardment Squadron, yet this mission was his first as the lead aircraft, tasked with coordinating 167 B-29s into their attack formation. In the first quarter of 1945, the B-29 casualty rate over Japan was a grim 14% per mission, with burns from phosphorus proving the deadliest cause of crew fatalities. White phosphorus is an insidious material. It self-ignites on contact, with air and reaches temperatures of hot enough to liquefy steel. The chemical cannot be smothered while oxygen is available. It relentlessly consumes tissue, boring down to the bone and refusing to stop burning. From February through April 1945, the 20th, Air Force had lost 43 B-29s to fires originating in the aircraft. Only 6 men survived phosphorus accidents, a grim 8% survival rate. Most victims perished within minutes. Erwin's bomb had jammed during launch, exploding within the plane's fuselage. The blast instantly obliterated his nose, fused his rubber oxygen mask onto his face, and destroyed both his eyes. He was plunged into total darkness. A thick, acrid white smoke rapidly choked the bomber. The flight crew couldn't see their control panels. Captain George Cimarrol, the aircraft commander, felt the B-29 lurch into a steep dive. He had no view of the altimeter or his co-pilot, and the intercom was silent. Smoke seared his lungs. Directly beneath Erwin lay the bomb bay, holding 12,000 pounds of incendiary bombs. If the phosphorus ate through the floor, the entire payload would explode. The mission would fail. 166 B-29s would be left leaderless and scattered. Cimarrol pulled the yoke back with all his might, but the bomber refused to level. They were hurtling toward the Pacific at 300 feet per minute. He estimated they had less than 40 seconds until impact. The ignited phosphorus munition lay sizzling on the deck at Erwin's feet. His face was ruined, his hands and flight suit ablaze. He was blind, and every inhalation drew in smoke. The navigator's bolted-down table blocked the route to the forward window. To dispose of the device, Erwin would have to grasp the burning bomb, crawl past the table, and force it out a 10-inch aperture. The phosphorus was burning at metal-melting heat. It was already melting through the aluminum deck. In an estimated 30 seconds, it would breach the bomb bay. Could a blind man handle a weapon burning at 2300 degrees? Erwin reached down and seized the phosphorus bomb with both hands. The chemical immediately set his gloves on fire. He clutched the bomb to his chest and began to pull himself forward. The phosphorus consumed his flight suit in 3 seconds. It burned through his skin, through muscle, and down to the bone. He was navigating by pure feel. His hands were dissolving onto the metal of the bomb. Every motion ground more phosphorus particles into his wounds. These particles would continue burning for months. He crawled 6 feet to the navigator's table, which was locked down, creating an insurmountable barrier. He jammed his left shoulder beneath the edge and shoved. The table's mechanism was jammed tight. He pushed harder. The phosphorus was scorching his chest. His right arm was burnt to the bone. He no longer had sensation in his hands. With one final effort, the table gave way. He crawled another 7 feet. His crewmates tried in vain to help, but the smoke was too dense. They couldn't reach him. He found the cockpit bulkhead and felt for the co-pilot's window. His fingers brushed the glass. He couldn't operate the latch. His hands were too severely damaged. He used his forearm to crank it open 6 inches. He shoved the burning bomb through the slot and collapsed. 22 seconds had elapsed since the explosion. Captain Cimarrol felt the aircraft cease its descent. The smoke began to thin. He could see his instruments again. Altitude, 9,800 feet. Airspeed, 210 knots. They were now climbing. Co-pilot, Second Lieutenant Leroy Stabler, turned and looked back. Erwin lay on the deck between the pilot seats. His flight suit was gone. His skin was mottled black and red. Bone was exposed on his arms and chest. His face was a ruin. Both eyes were featureless white. Stabler assumed he was dead. Erwin spoke. He asked if the crew was okay. He asked if anyone else was hurt. His voice was clear and calm. He remained fully conscious. The embedded phosphorus particles kept burning. Crew members sprayed his wounds with extinguishers, but the chemical couldn't be quenched. Every time they removed a bandage to treat him, the particles instantly reignited. White vapor drifted up from his chest, his arms, his face. The chemical was burning from the inside out. Flight Engineer Technical Sergeant Herbert Schnipper estimated. Erwin had 20 to 30 phosphorus fragments burning internally. Each particle was burning at furnace-like temperatures. Erwin never cried out, never complained. He only concerned himself with the welfare of his crew. Cimarol scrubbed the mission. The remaining 166 B-29s scattered without their lead signal. The attack ultimately failed, but 12 men were alive. Cimarol turned the bomber southeast, aiming for Iwo Jima, 290 miles away. The island had been secured 5 weeks prior. On March 26th, the Marines had prepared an emergency airstrip, specifically for damaged B-29s. It was the only nearby location where Erwin could receive medical care. At cruising speed, they would reach Iwo in 73 minutes. Medical staff on Guam had previously warned bomber crews that phosphorus burn victims rarely survived more than 2 hours. Erwin had been burning for 8 minutes. The crew exhausted every option. Wet towels were applied to the wounds, but the phosphorus burned right through them. Morphine injections were offered, but Erwin refused, stating he needed to stay awake. He kept asking about his crew and the mission's outcome. Bombardier First Lieutenant Kenneth Crosby assured him everyone was safe, that they were heading to Iwo, and that he had saved the aircraft. Erwin nodded, glad to hear it. Then he asked if the smoke bombs had functioned correctly. He was worried about the other bombers assembling without the lead signal. His body was on fire internally, and his mind was still on the success of the mission. At 10:51 a.m., City of Los Angeles landed on Iwo Jima's south field. Ambulances were waiting. Medical staff opened the forward hatch and observed Erwin. A Navy doctor, Lieutenant Commander John Bradley, examined him. Bradley, having treated hundreds of burns during the Iwo Jima invasion, had never encountered such severe phosphorus damage. Erwin's flight suit was vaporized. 70% of his body was scorched black. His nose was gone, his right eye destroyed, and his left eye severely injured. His right arm was burned to the bone from elbow to fingertips. Bradley classified the injuries as third-degree burns over most of his body and gave Erwin less than 4 hours to live. They transferred Erwin to a stretcher. He remained conscious during the move. Bradley administered plasma and started an IV. Erwin asked if his crew was safe. Bradley confirmed their safety. Erwin tried to smile. His facial muscles couldn't manage it. The phosphorus had burned through them. Bradley had seen many men die. They usually fell silent. Erwin, however, continued to speak, asking about his crew, the mission, and the other bombers. Bradley had never witnessed such resilience. At Fleet Hospital 103 on Iwo Jima, surgeons examined Erwin. They had no established protocol for phosphorus burns of this magnitude. Standard practice was tissue excision, but Erwin's injuries were too extensive. Surgery would be fatal. They chose to stabilize him for transport to the superior facilities on Guam. Erwin's vital signs were crashing. Blood pressure plummeted. Heart rate surged. His respiratory function was failing. The phosphorus was burning his lungs from within. He was dying. 300 miles away on Guam, Major General Curtis LeMay received a radio report of the incident. The commander of the 21st Bomber Command had endured 43 B-29 losses and hundreds of casualties, but this report was unique. An enlisted man, blinded, had carried a burning phosphorus bomb through his aircraft, saving 12 lives. LeMay called his chief of staff, Brigadier General Lawrence Norstad, and ordered an immediate Medal of Honor recommendation. Norstad explained the approval process took months. LeMay countered that Erwin had hours. LeMay knew the regulations. The process, Army, War Department, Congress, President, took a minimum of 6 months. Erwin likely had 6 hours. LeMay contacted Major General Willis Hale, commander of Army Air Force's Pacific Ocean areas in Hawaii. He told Hale about Erwin and demanded a Medal of Honor today. Hale said it was impossible. LeMay instructed him to make it happen. At 11:30 a.m., Norstad finished the 4-paragraph citation. LeMay signed it and sent it via high-priority military channel to Washington. The message reached the War Department at 3:15 a.m. Washington time. A staff officer woke Secretary of War Henry Stimson, who read the citation. He called the White House. President Harry S. Truman had been in office for 0 days, Franklin. Roosevelt had died earlier that afternoon. Truman was receiving his initial war briefing when Stimson called. The new president listened to Erwin's account, approved the medal, and signed the authorization. The total lapsed time from the incident to presidential approval: 6 hours and 48 minutes. However, approval was not delivery. The Medal of Honor is a physical object, a gold star on a light blue ribbon. The War Department had none in the Pacific. Hale's staff searched Guam, Saipan, and Tinian, no medals. At 4:20 p.m., an aide recalled a Medal of Honor displayed in a case at Fort Shafter, Hawaii, in the office of Lieutenant General Robert Richardson. The case was locked, and Richardson was in Manila. Hale dispatched a B-29 crew to Fort Shafter. The crew reached Richardson's office at 6:30 p.m. The building was secured. They found a security officer, explained the emergency, but he lacked the keys. The crew smashed a window, climbed in, found the padlocked display case, broke the glass, took the medal, and left an explanatory note. They flew back to Guam, landing at 11:45 p.m., 13 hours after. Erwin ejected the bomb. Erwin was at Fleet Hospital. 1:03, he had been evacuated. From Iwo Jima to Guam at 2 p.m., his heart had stopped twice during the flight, requiring 2 resuscitations. On Guam, under surgical lights, doctors saw the phosphorus particles still burning. Small orange dots of light glowed beneath his skin on his chest, arms, and face. Each particle burned at over 2,000 degrees. The particles were too numerous and deep to remove. Excision would cause fatal shock. The doctors stabilized him, gave him plasma and antibiotics, and waited for him to die. He didn't die. At 2 a.m. on April 13th, Erwin's vital signs stabilized. His heart rate, blood pressure, and breathing were holding steady. The phosphorus continued to burn, but the rate had decreased. His body was somehow tolerating the toxic chemical. The chief surgeon, Captain Thomas Manning, examined him. Erwin was conscious and still asking about his crew. Manning, a 14-year military surgeon, had never witnessed such a thing. Erwin should have succumbed 8 times over to shock, blood loss, respiratory failure, cardiac arrest, or infection. Manning called LeMay at 3:30 a.m. and reported that Erwin was alive and likely to stay that way, and he was conscious and talking. LeMay announced he was coming to the hospital with the medal. At 0900 hours on April 19, 1945, 7 days after the incident, Major General Willis Hale entered Fleet Hospital 103, carrying the Medal of Honor. Erwin was in bed, completely swathed in bandages except for a small opening for his mouth. He couldn't see or move, but he was conscious. Hale placed the medal on the sheet beside Erwin's head and read the citation aloud. The 11 other crew members of the City of Loss. Angelus stood at attention around the bed. Captain Cimarrol, Stabler, Strauss, Crosby, Schnipper, Harmon, Miner, Schaefer, Leutzinger, Pastorini, and Krebs, every man Erwin had saved. They were in dress uniform. Several were weeping. Erwin couldn't see them, but he heard them. LeMay arrived 10 minutes later and walked directly to the bed. He looked at the bandages, the medal, and the crew. LeMay was known as a merciless commander, nicknamed Iron Ass, who had ordered the deadly Tokyo firebombing. But when he addressed Erwin, his voice softened. He said, "Your effort to save the lives of your fellow crewmen is the most extraordinary kind of heroism I know." Erwin tried to reply, his voice weak from smoke inhalation. He thanked the general and said he was simply doing his job. LeMay shook his head. He said this was far beyond duty or training, beyond anything he had seen in 30 years. He told Erwin the entire Pacific Command knew his name and what he had done. They were calling him the bravest man in the 20th Air Force. Erwin insisted he wasn't brave. He was scared the whole time. LeMay replied, "That's what makes it brave." The Medal of Honor presentation was national news. Newspapers ran the story on the front page, the fastest Medal of Honor in American history. 7 days from incident to award. The prior record was 43 days. Radio broadcasts told his story coast to coast. His mother, Pearl Erwin, heard about it on the radio in Adamsville, Alabama. Before the official Army notification telegram arrived 3 days later, she collapsed when she read it. The telegram stated Henry was alive but severely wounded, expected to survive. The ceremony had already occurred. Erwin remained at Fleet Hospital 103 for 37 days. The phosphorus particles kept burning. Doctors performed 12 surgeries to remove tissue and graft skin, rebuilding his face. Each surgery lasted 6 to 8 hours. Erwin endured them without complaint, only asking about his crew and the mission. Nurses told him the mission was scrubbed after his aircraft aborted. Erwin was disappointed, expressing a wish the mission had succeeded. The staff was stunned. A man who nearly died saving 12 men was concerned about mission failure. On May 26th, doctors flew Erwin to Letterman General Hospital in San Francisco. The 14-hour flight was interrupted twice when his burns reignited due to cabin pressure changes. Medics had to put out the fire on his bandages mid-flight. Erwin remained conscious, speaking to the staff, asking about their families and experiences. A man burning from within, asking others how they were doing. At Letterman, Major John Longacre, chief of plastic surgery, examined him. He had never seen such severe phosphorus burns on a living patient. Erwin had third-degree burns over 70% of his body. His right arm was destroyed to the bone. His face required total reconstruction. His nose and right ear were gone, and both eyes were damaged. Longacre estimated a minimum of 40 surgeries over 2 or 3 years. Erwin asked when he could return to duty. Longacre told him the truth. He would never fly again and was being medically discharged with full disability benefits. Erwin, only 24 and 2 years into his service, nodded, said he understood, and then asked if he could help other veterans after he recovered. Longacre assured him he could. The first surgery was on June 2, 1945, lasting 9 hours. Days later, particles in his arm reignited. The new skin graft burned away. They had to restart. The second surgery on June 15th had the same result. Longacre realized every phosphorus particle had to be removed before grafts would adhere, but they were too deep. Over the next 6 weeks, Longacre performed 7 more surgeries, removing an estimated 60 particles. Many more remained, glowing under the surgical lights. Each surgery carried the risk of infection and further permanent disability. Erwin never complained, never asked for extra morphine. He only asked when he could start helping other veterans. On July 17th, Erwin's brother Charles, a Marine stationed on Guam, arrived on emergency leave arranged by LeMay. Nurses warned Charles about Henry's appearance. Charles sat beside the bed for 2 minutes, silent. Erwin spoke first, asking about Charles's well-being and their mother. Charles cried. He told him everyone at home was proud. Erwin insisted he wasn't a hero. He was just scared the bomb would kill his crew. Charles slept in a chair and they talked about Alabama. The nurses noted it was the first time they'd heard Erwin laugh. Erwin's health improved through July and August. His weight stabilized at 87 pounds, having lost 53 pounds. His body had consumed itself to survive. Doctors increased his diet to 4,000 calories daily. The surgeries continued. Surgery 15 on August 9th. They removed the last accessible particles from his right arm. Longacre believed about 20 particles remained too deep to remove. They would continue to burn slowly for months or years. On September 2, 1945, World War II ended. Erwin was still in the hospital undergoing surgery. The celebrations happened without him. Surgery 16 on September 8th targeted infections in his face. It took 11 hours. Longacre removed 14 particles from his cheekbones, forehead, and jaw. Erwin's face was mostly scar tissue, but he was alive. Between September and December 1945, Longacre performed 9 more surgeries, 25 total since June, each one carefully cutting through scar tissue to reach the embedded particles. Erwin never refused, desperate to stop the burning so he could help other veterans. Longacre estimated 5 or more years for complete healing. Erwin accepted this, saying he would work with what he had. On December 20, 1945, doctors permitted limited mobility. He could walk with assistance and feed himself with his left hand. His right arm had minimal function. The burns had destroyed muscle and nerves. Physical therapists marveled at his determination. He said he wanted to be useful again. His left eye regained partial vision. He could see shapes, light and shadows, though colors were distorted. His right eye was permanently blind. He adapted, learning to judge distance and read with his face 6 inches from the page. By January 1946, he walked unassisted. The hospital staff called it a miracle. Erwin called it progress. On March 8, 1946, Erwin was discharged from Letterman Hospital after 10 months and 28 surgeries. He was promoted to Master Sergeant and given a 100% service-connected disability rating. He asked the Veterans Administration for a job, and they offered him a position as a benefits counselor in Birmingham, Alabama. Erwin accepted immediately. He said he wanted to spend his life helping the men who served. Understanding their struggles, the VA administrator questioned him about the difficulty and long hours of the job. Erwin was resolute. On April 12, 1946, exactly 1 year after the incident, Erwin began work at the VA office in Birmingham. Erwin worked at the Birmingham VA for 37 years. He processed claims, explained disability ratings, and helped veterans and their families. He worked 6 days a week, 10 hours a day, only taking time off for hospitalizations. Between 19